My name is Sadie. I am 28 years old, and I worked 3 jobs for 6 years to afford my apartment in Chicago. Family dinner at my parents' house is usually pleasant enough, but last month my mother actually suggested I sell my home to pay off my younger sister's gambling debts. When I refused, she called me unbelievably selfish to my face. The next morning, I woke up to 57 missed calls and a family that had turned against me. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. If you have ever had to stand your ground against family pressure, please hit subscribe. Trust me, you will want to hear how this ends. I grew up in a comfortable middle-class home in suburban Illinois, about 40 minutes outside of Chicago. My parents, Diana and Robert, provided a stable environment for my younger sister Jessica and me, though looking back, there were always signs of the family dynamics that would eventually explode in my face. From an early age, I was labeled the responsible one. I started babysitting at 12, got my first official job at 16, working at a local grocery store, and saved most of what I earned. My parents emphasized education and financial independence, especially for me. They would say things like, Sadie is so mature, and Sadie always has her head on straight. I took pride in these descriptions and worked hard to live up to them. Jessica, 3 years younger than me at 25, was always different. Where I was practical, she was dreamy. Where I was cautious, she was impulsive. And where I worked hard for what I wanted, things often seemed to fall into Jessica's lap through charm and circumstance. She has this magnetic personality that draws people in, especially our mother. I remember when Jessica crashed her first car at 17. It was a hand-me-down from our parents, the same one I had driven for 2 years without incident. Jessica had been texting while driving and rear-ended someone at a stoplight. Instead of facing consequences, my mother rushed to comfort her, saying, "These things happen, sweetheart." Dad bought her another car within 2 weeks, while I had saved for months to upgrade from that old sedan when I had it. This pattern continued through our young adult years. I put myself through state university with a combination of scholarships, student loans, and working 30 hours a week at a campus bookstore. Meanwhile, Jessica attended 3 different colleges in 4 years, dropping out each time when things got too stressful or she needed to find herself. My parents paid her full tuition, housing, and spending money each time. After graduation, I took an entry-level position at a marketing firm in Chicago. The salary was modest, but it offered growth potential. I shared a cramped apartment with 2 roommates, took public transportation everywhere, and brought lunch from home every day. For 3 years, I lived on a strict budget, picking up freelance graphic design work on weekends and evenings. My goal was clear: save enough for a down payment on my own place. In Chicago's housing market, this was no small feat. I tracked every expense in a spreadsheet, celebrating small victories like finding an extra $100 to put toward my dream at the end of each month. No vacations, minimal new clothes, and a social life that consisted mostly of free events and potluck dinners with friends. Meanwhile, Jessica floated between jobs as a bartender, retail associate, personal assistant, and briefly a yoga instructor after a 2-week certification program my parents paid for. Nothing held her interest for long. She lived in a downtown apartment with rent that exceeded my entire monthly budget, drove a newer model car than either of our parents, and took spontaneous weekend trips to Nashville or Miami when she felt stressed. The source of her lifestyle was no mystery. My parents continued to subsidize her, believing that Jessica was still finding her way and needed their support more than I did. After all, I was doing fine on my own, wasn't I? My success became the justification for their favoritism. Despite these frustrations, I maintained a cordial relationship with my family. I called home weekly, visited for major holidays, and kept conversations light. I learned that discussing finances or Jessica's latest crisis only led to tension, so I avoided those topics. It was easier to create some emotional distance while still staying connected. Then 3 years ago, my hard work finally paid off. I had saved enough for a down payment on a small but beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, one of my favorite Chicago neighborhoods. The second bedroom would serve as my home office for my growing freelance business, which I hoped would eventually allow me to go independent from my agency job. I cannot adequately describe what this apartment means to me. The morning I signed the closing papers and received my keys, I sat alone on the hardwood floor of the empty living room and cried. This space represented every extra shift, every declined invitation, every careful budget decision I had made for years. It was the physical manifestation of my independence, my discipline, and my values. The apartment itself is nothing extravagant, around 900 square feet, with a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. The kitchen opens to the living area, which gets beautiful natural light in the afternoons. Both bedrooms are modestly sized, but the main bedroom fits my queen bed and dresser comfortably. The building has a small gym in the basement and secure entry, important for a woman living alone in the city. When I gave my family a virtual tour after moving in, Jessica commented, "It is so small for what you probably paid," while my mother said, "Well, it is a start, honey." My father, to his credit, seemed genuinely proud, asking questions about the neighborhood and telling me I had done well. Their reactions stung, but I refused to let them diminish my achievement. After buying my apartment, I actually found my relationship with my family improving somewhat. Having my own space, my own asset, gave me confidence in family interactions. I felt less affected by the old dynamics because I had tangible proof of my independence. I could more easily brush off comments about Jessica's latest drama, or my mother's subtle digs about my single status and career focus. About a year ago, I suggested starting a monthly family dinner tradition. The first Sunday of each month, we would gather at my parents' suburban home for a home-cooked meal and quality time together. This structured contact felt manageable to me, and everyone agreed it was a nice idea. For several months, these dinners were pleasant enough, with conversations staying on safe topics like neighborhood news, my dad's golf game, or my mother's garden club activities. I had no idea that the May dinner would change everything between us. I arrived at my parents' house that Sunday evening feeling particularly good. Spring had finally taken hold in Illinois after a long winter. My recent work project had earned me praise from the agency's creative director. And I had spent the morning baking my grandmother's recipe for blueberry cobbler to bring for dessert. The driveway already held Jessica's white Audi, which I noted with a small twinge of the old resentment. I pushed it aside, determined to enjoy the evening. I parked my practical 5-year-old Honda next to it and carefully balanced the cobbler as I made my way to the front door. There she is. My dad called as I entered, coming to take the dessert from me. He gave me a one-armed hug and whispered, "Looks delicious," before disappearing into the kitchen. My mother was stirring something on the stove when I entered the kitchen, and she turned to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Sadie, perfect timing. We are almost ready to eat. Would you mind filling the water glasses?" I noticed immediately that her smile seemed strained, but I attributed it to the stress of cooking. I filled the glasses at the sink, making small talk about the unusually warm May weather, and asking about her week. "Oh, you know the usual," she responded vaguely, her attention clearly elsewhere. "Jessica is in the living room. Why don't you go say hello while I finish up here?" I found Jessica curled up in the corner of the sofa, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how tired she appeared. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her normally perfect makeup seemed hastily applied. "Hey, Jess," I said, settling into the armchair across from her. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just tired. Work has been crazy." Jessica had recently started a job as a customer service representative at a local credit union, her longest employment stint in years at nearly 6 months. "I hear you," I replied, trying to establish some common ground. "I had to pull 2 late nights last week to finish a campaign for a new client." Jessica just nodded, her eyes drifting back to her phone. I noticed her chewing her lower lip, a nervous habit from childhood. Something was definitely off. But before I could probe further, Dad announced dinner was ready. The first half of the meal passed with unusually stilted conversation. Mom asked about my job, and I shared a few anecdotes about my coworkers and the new campaign. Dad talked about a problem with the neighbor's fence encroaching on their property line. Jessica remained largely silent, pushing food around her plate more than eating it. During a lull in the conversation, Mom reached over and placed her hand on Jessica's arm. "Sweetie, do you want to tell Sadie what is going on?" Jessica put down her fork and looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "I am in trouble, Sadie. Bad trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I asked, setting down my own fork as concern replaced my earlier irritation. Jessica took a shaky breath. "I owe $87,000. I choked on the sip of water I had just taken. 87,000? How is that even possible? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I have a problem. A gambling problem. It started small, just sports betting with this app. I won a few times at first and it felt amazing. Then I started losing, but I was sure I could win it back if I just played smarter. Her voice cracked. I maxed out my credit cards, I took out personal loans, I borrowed from friends, and then I found these online poker games and things just spiraled completely out of control. The dining room fell silent except for Jessica's quiet sobs. I looked at my parents expecting to see shock matching my own, but instead saw resignation on my father's face and something like calculated concern on my mother's. With a sinking feeling, I realized they had already known. How long has this been going on? I asked, directing the question to the table at large. About 2 years, Jessica admitted, but it got really bad in the last 6 months. 2 years, which meant she had been gambling when she started the credit union job when she moved into her expensive apartment, and when she took that girls' trip to Miami 3 months ago, that she had plastered all over Instagram. Have you sought help? I asked, trying to process this revelation. There are gambling addiction programs therapists who specialize in this kind of thing. We have been discussing options, my mother interjected. But first we need to address the immediate crisis. Jessica's creditors are calling constantly. Some of them are not the kind of people you want to be indebted to if you understand what I mean. I stared at her. Are you saying she borrowed from loan sharks' illegal lenders? Not exactly. Jessica sniffled. But some of these online gambling sites work with collection agencies that can be really aggressive. Dad cleared his throat. Jessica has agreed to move back home for a while and get help for her addiction. She is going to sell her car and put that toward the debt. That is good, I said cautiously, sensing there was more to this family meeting than Jessica's confession. It sounds like a solid first step. But it is not nearly enough. Mom continued, her voice taking on a tone I recognized from childhood discussions about family priorities. The Audi will only cover a small fraction of what she owes. We have already refinanced our house to help with some of it, but we are retired now, and there is only so much we can do without risking our own security. An uncomfortable feeling began growing in my stomach. That is understandable. Jessica might need to declare bankruptcy, as difficult as that would be. Bankruptcy would ruin her life, Mom said sharply. She is only 25. Her credit would be destroyed for a decade. No, we need a family solution. She took a deliberate sip of water, then looked directly at me. Sadie, you have a substantial financial asset that could solve this problem. The uncomfortable feeling exploded into full-blown alarm. What do you mean? Your apartment, she said matter-of-factly. Property values in Lincoln Park have increased significantly since you bought it. If you sold it now, you would have enough to cover Jessica's debt and still have money left over for a nice rental while you save up again. I stared at her in disbelief, certain I had misheard. You want me to sell my home? The one I worked multiple jobs for years to afford? It would only be temporary, Mom continued, as if we were discussing me loaning Jessica a dress rather than liquidating my biggest asset and only real financial security. You could stay here with us until you find a new place. The Chicago rental market is quite reasonable in some areas. I looked at Jessica, who was watching me with desperate hope in her eyes, then at my father, who was studying his plate with unusual intensity, avoiding my gaze. This cannot be a serious suggestion, I finally said, my voice sounding strangely calm despite the thundering of my heart. Sadie, Jessica pleaded, I don't know what else to do. These people are threatening legal action. Some of them have my personal information. I'm scared. I understand you are in a terrible situation, Jess, and I sympathize. But selling my home is not an option. I could maybe help with a small loan toward financial counseling, or help you create a debt management plan, but a small loan, my mother interrupted, her voice rising. Your sister needs real help, not pocket change. After all we have done for both of you growing up, I would think you would want to help your family in a crisis. This is not about wanting to help, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. This is about the scale of what you are asking. You are asking me to give up my home, my security, everything I have worked for. It is just a material possession, Mom pressed. Jessica would do it for you if the situations were reversed. I nearly laughed at this absurd statement, but caught myself. Mom, Jessica has never saved enough money to buy a home. We don't know what she would do, but that is beside the point. My apartment is not just a material possession. It represents years of sacrifice and hard work. So you care more about your things than your sister's well-being? My mother's tone had turned cold. That is not fair, I protested, feeling the conversation rapidly spinning out of control. There are other solutions here. Jessica needs addiction counseling first and foremost, then a structured debt repayment plan or possibly bankruptcy. Selling my apartment is an extreme measure that doesn't actually address the root problem. Professional help costs money we don't have, Mom countered, and Jessica can't possibly repay this kind of debt on her customer service salary. She could get a second job, I suggested. I worked 3 jobs at one point to save for my down payment. Jessica let out a sob. You don't understand what it is like to have this kind of pressure, Sadie. I can't sleep, I can't eat. These creditors call day and night. Some have threatened to contact my workplace. I felt a surge of frustration. And I'm truly sorry about that, Jess. But your gambling addiction and debt aren't going to be solved by me giving up my home. If anything, that would just be enabling the same pattern that got you here. My father finally looked up. Maybe you could help out a little, Sadie. Not the whole amount, but something to take the pressure off while Jessica gets help. His voice was conciliatory, playing the peacemaker role he had adopted throughout our childhood. I took a deep breath. Dad, I might be able to help with some money for addiction treatment, but I cannot and will not sell my apartment. After everything your father and I have sacrificed for you, my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. All the opportunities we gave you, the support through college. Support? I couldn't help the incredulous tone. Mom, I worked 30 hours a week through college and took out student loans that I just finished paying off last year. Jessica is the one who had 3 fully funded attempts at college. My mother's face flushed. So now you're keeping score. This isn't about who got what in the past. This is about Jessica needing help now, and you being in a position to provide it. I am not in a position to provide it, I insisted. Not in the way you're suggesting. It would be financially devastating for me. You could rebuild, Mom argued. You're young, you have a good job. Jessica's life could be ruined by this debt. And mine wouldn't be ruined by losing my home and starting over from scratch, I asked. It is different for you, Mom said dismissively. You have always been stronger, more capable. So I'm being punished for being responsible. The injustice of it all was becoming overwhelming. Jessica was crying openly now. Please, Sadie, I don't know what else to do. I'm so afraid. I steeled myself against her tears, knowing that giving in wouldn't actually help her in the long run. Jess, I will help you find resources for your gambling addiction. I will help you create a financial plan, but I will not sell my apartment. My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You've always been unbelievably selfish, Sadie. I raised you better than this. Your sister is drowning, and you're refusing to throw her a life preserver because you might get your feet wet. The words hit me like a physical blow. For years, I had been the responsible one, the mature one, the one who didn't need help because I could handle things myself. Now, the one time I refused to set myself on fire to keep others warm, I was unbelievably selfish. I stood up too, surprising myself with how steady my voice remained. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom. I love Jessica, and I want her to get better, but enabling her isn't helping her, and destroying my financial security isn't a reasonable solution. If you walk away now, don't bother coming back until you're ready to actually be part of this family, my mother said, her words dripping with disappointment and anger. I looked at my father, hoping for some support, but he merely looked away, unwilling to challenge my mother. I looked at Jessica, whose tearful expression had transformed into something closer to resentment. Without another word, I grabbed my purse and walked out the uneaten blueberry cobbler still sitting on the kitchen counter. The drive home was a blur, tears streaming down my face as I processed what had just happened. Back in my apartment, the place my mother had so casually suggested I give up, I wandered from room to room, looking at everything I had worked so hard to achieve. The furniture I had carefully selected piece by piece, the art on the walls that I had collected over years, the small balcony garden I had nurtured through 2 Chicago summers. For the first time, I looked at my home through my mother's eyes and felt a wave of doubt. Was it selfish to hold on to this place when my sister was in trouble? Was my mother right that I could simply start over, that my stability and security were less important than Jessica's crisis? I sank onto my couch, the one I had saved for 6 months to buy, and tried to think rationally. Jessica's debt was the result of an addiction, yes, but also of years of choices, many of them enabled by our parents. My apartment was the result of my choices, years of sacrifice and careful planning. If I sold it now in this market, I would likely clear enough to pay Jessica's debt. But then what would I move back home, as my mother suggested, back into the dysfunction I had worked so hard to escape? Would Jessica actually get help for her gambling addiction? Or would my sacrifice simply reset the cycle until the next crisis? My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica just after midnight. "You could fix this if you wanted to. I guess your apartment means more to you than your sister." I didn't respond. Instead, I took a sleeping pill and fell into a restless sleep, emotionally exhausted from the evening's confrontation. When I woke the next morning and checked my phone, I was stunned to see 57 missed calls. 28 from my mother, 15 from Jessica, and 14 from my father. The timestamp showed they had been calling throughout the night, taking turns in what felt like a coordinated campaign. The voicemails ranged from tearful pleas to angry accusations. My mother's messages started with guilt trips about family loyalty and escalated to outright statements that I was betraying my sister. Jessica's were emotional manipulations, saying things like, "I don't know how I'll get through this without you," and "I thought you loved me." My father's were more subdued, but equally pressuring, talking about finding a compromise and doing the right thing for the family. By mid-morning, the extended family had been deployed. I received calls from 2 aunts, an uncle, and my grandmother, all expressing concern about the situation and suggesting I reconsider my position. It became clear that my mother had called everyone with her version of events, casting me as the villain who refused to help my sister in her time of need. No one seemed to find it outrageous that I was being asked to sell my home. Instead, they all framed it as a simple act of family support, as if I were being asked to loan Jessica a few $100s, rather than upend my entire life. I silenced my phone, but couldn't escape the emotional toll. At work, I struggled to focus on the advertising campaign I was supposed to be developing. My manager noticed my distraction and asked if everything was okay. I gave a vague answer about family issues and promised to stay on schedule with the project. By lunchtime, I desperately needed to talk to someone outside the situation. I called my friend Madison, who I had known since college, and asked if she could meet for a quick bite, over sandwiches at a cafe near my office. I told her everything that had happened. Her expression shifted from concern to disbelief to outrage as I relayed the details of the dinner and its aftermath. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "Your sister gambled herself into massive debt, and your parents' solution is for you to sell your home. The home you worked 3 jobs to afford, and they're calling you selfish for refusing." Put so plainly, it sounded even more absurd than it had felt. "Yes, that's basically it." Madison set down her sandwich, clearly angry on my behalf. "Sadie, that is financial abuse and emotional blackmail. No reasonable person would expect you to do that. Your mother is trying to make you responsible for Jessica's addiction, and that is completely wrong." Her validation was like a life raft in stormy seas. "So I'm not being selfish?" "God, no," Madison exclaimed. "You're being rational and setting appropriate boundaries. Your family is being completely unreasonable." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "And 57 calls overnight. That's harassment, pure and simple." After lunch, I returned to work with a slightly clearer head. Madison's perspective had helped me see that I wasn't the one with the distorted view of the situation. That evening, I took the first steps toward protecting my boundaries. I filtered my family's numbers so their calls would go straight to voicemail, and I muted our family group chat. The next day, I discovered that Jessica had been posting cryptic but pointed messages on social media, things like blood isn't always thicker than water, and finding out who really has your back when times get tough. Our mutual family friends were commenting with supportive messages, clearly aware of some drama, but not the specifics. The campaign extended beyond phone calls. My parents showed up unannounced at my apartment that weekend, ringing my buzzer repeatedly until I finally answered the intercom. "We need to talk, Sadie." My father's voice crackled through the speaker. "Your mother is very upset, and we need to resolve this as a family." "This isn't a good time," I responded, my heart racing at the ambush. "I'm not ready to talk yet." "Sadie Elizabeth," my mother's voice cut in. "You come down here right now. We drove all this way to see you." I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I'm not coming down. I need space right now. Please respect that." "This is ridiculous." My mother's voice rose. "We're your parents. You can't just ignore us because you don't like what we have to say." "I'm not ignoring you because I don't like what you have to say. I'm setting a boundary because you're asking me to sacrifice my financial security and home and calling me selfish for refusing." My voice was shaking but determined. "Fine," my mother finally said after a long pause. "But this isn't over, Sadie. Family doesn't turn their back on family." As they left, I sank to the floor of my entryway back against the door and let the tears come. The worst part wasn't even the request itself, as outrageous as it was. It was the revelation of how my family really saw me, how easily they could dismiss everything I had worked for when it conflicted with the family dynamic they had established long ago. A week after the disastrous family dinner, I decided I needed more information before making any final decisions about my relationship with my family. The harassment had continued, though somewhat abated, and I had maintained my distance while I processed everything. I reached out to my cousin Taylor, who had always been close to Jessica, and asked if we could meet for coffee. I didn't share the specifics of the situation via text, just said I wanted to catch up. Taylor agreed, suggesting a cafe halfway between our places. When we met, I could tell immediately that Taylor had heard something about the family drama. Her greeting was cautious, her eyes assessing. "I guess you've heard about Jessica's situation," I said after we had ordered our coffees. Taylor nodded. "Some of it. Aunt Diana called my mom, who told me Jessica was in some kind of financial trouble and you were refusing to help." She looked uncomfortable, but I figured there was more to the story. "There is," I confirmed, and proceeded to give her the unvarnished truth about the dinner and what had been asked of me. Taylor's eyes widened as I spoke. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "Wow, they want you to sell your apartment. That's extreme. You seem less surprised about the gambling debt than I was," I observed. Taylor looked down at her coffee. "That's because I've known about Jessica's gambling for a while. Not the full extent, but enough to be concerned." "What? How?" I asked, surprised that Taylor had known something so significant about my sister that I hadn't. "About a year ago, Jessica asked to borrow $3,000 from me. She said it was for a certification program that would help her advance at the credit union." Taylor's expression was pained. "I found out later she used it to cover gambling losses. When I confronted her, she broke down and admitted she'd been betting on sports and playing online poker." This was a revelation. "Did she pay you back?" Taylor shook her head. "No. She promised she would, but then kept making excuses. Eventually, I wrote it off as a lesson learned." "Did she tell our parents about her gambling back then?" "She said she couldn't because they had just helped her pay off a maxed-out credit card, and they'd be too disappointed." Taylor hesitated, then added, "Sadie, there's something else you should know. The debt isn't just from gambling." I felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "Jessica has been dating this guy Damon for about 8 months. She doesn't post about him on social media, and I don't think your parents have met him. He's got expensive tastes, and Jessica has been spending a lot trying to keep up with his lifestyle." "How do you know this?" I asked. She showed me pictures of them at high-end restaurants, weekend trips to Vegas and Miami. She was buying him gifts, expensive ones like designer clothes and watches. Taylor looked genuinely concerned. I asked how she could afford it, and she brushed it off, saying she had figured out a system to make extra money. This added a whole new dimension to Jessica's financial problems. It wasn't just the gambling addiction. but also a relationship that had encouraged financial irresponsibility. "There's one more thing," Taylor said hesitantly. "Last Christmas, I overheard your parents talking. They mentioned having to take money from their retirement accounts to help Jessica with some kind of debt settlement. They seemed really worried about their financial future." This hit me hard. If my parents had already depleted their retirement savings helping Jessica, it explained their desperation to find another solution this time, namely my apartment. Armed with this new information, I decided to consult a professional. I made an appointment with a financial advisor my company had on retainer for employees. I explained the situation as clearly as I could, including the pressure from my family and the new details I had learned from Taylor. The financial advisor, a woman in her 50s named Margaret, listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, she looked at me with a mixture of professional concern and personal empathy. "First, let me be clear, what your family is asking is completely inappropriate from a financial planning perspective," she said firmly. "Your apartment is your primary asset and financial security. Liquidating it to pay someone else's gambling debts would be catastrophically unwise." "Even if that someone is my sister?" I asked, still wrestling with the guilt my family had planted. "Even then," Margaret confirmed, "this situation goes beyond normal family help. Your sister has an addiction that requires professional treatment, not a financial bailout that would devastate your future security." She ran some numbers showing me exactly what I would lose in the long term if I sold now, both in terms of property appreciation and the cost of restarting the home buying process years later. "They're asking you to sacrifice your financial security and future," she concluded. "And from what you've told me, this would likely not be a one-time rescue, but the continuation of a pattern." Following my meeting with Margaret, I decided to dig deeper into Jessica's situation. Her social media accounts were public, and scrolling back through them revealed a disturbing pattern. While she had been accumulating this massive debt, she was posting photos of luxury restaurant meals, designer shopping bags, weekend getaways, and nightclub outings. One post from just 2 months ago showed a champagne toast with the caption, "Living my best life." The disconnect between these images and the desperate, tearful sister at the dinner table was jarring. I also found several photos where a man's presence was indicated, but his face never shown, supporting Taylor's information about the secret boyfriend with expensive tastes. In one picture, Jessica was wearing a watch that looked significantly more expensive than anything I had ever seen her wear before, captioned, "Best surprise ever from someone special." With this fuller picture emerging, I decided to try one more approach before making any final decisions. I texted my father and asked if he would meet me alone for breakfast at his favorite diner, a place we had often gone together during my high school years. To my relief, he agreed, suggesting 7:30 the following morning, presumably before my mother would be awake. When I arrived at the diner, he was already there, looking tired and much older than his 62 years. "Thanks for meeting me, Dad," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. He nodded, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here. She wouldn't approve." That told me volumes about the current dynamic at home. "How are things?" I asked carefully. He sighed deeply. "Tense. Jessica is staying in her old room. She cries a lot. Your mother is, well, you know how she gets when she's worried about one of you girls." "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you and Mom already used your retirement savings to help Jessica with previous debts?" His startled expression confirmed Taylor's information before he even spoke. "Who told you that?" "It doesn't matter, is it true?" He stared down at his coffee. "Yes. About 8 months ago, Jessica came to us with credit card debt of nearly $30,000. We took a distribution from my 401k to help her. We paid the tax penalty and everything. And now she's in debt again for an even larger amount," I said gently. $87,000. He shook his head in disbelief. "I don't even understand how it happened so quickly." "Dad, has it occurred to you that selling my apartment wouldn't actually solve the real problem here? That Jessica needs professional help for her gambling addiction, and that bailing her out financially might actually enable her to continue the destructive behavior?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother doesn't see it that way. She just sees Jessica in trouble and wants to fix it. Mom has been enabling Jessica for years," I said, trying to keep my voice kind despite my frustration. And now you're both asking me to participate in that enabling by sacrificing everything I've worked for. He looked up at me, and I saw the exhaustion and fear in his eyes. I don't know what else to do, Sadie. Your mother is determined to help Jessica at any cost. I'm worried about our retirement, about what will happen to us. But whenever I bring it up, your mother accuses me of not caring about Jessica's well-being. In that moment, I saw clearly how trapped my father felt, caught between my mother's enabling and his own financial fears. He had been passive in the face of my mother's decisions for decades, and now he felt powerless to change course, even as he recognized the danger ahead. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said sincerely. "This is a terrible situation for everyone, but selling my apartment isn't the answer. It would just be a temporary bandage on a much deeper problem." "I know," he admitted quietly. "I know that, Sadie, but I don't know how to stand up to your mother on this. I don't know how to help Jessica in a way that doesn't just set us up for the next crisis." As we finished breakfast, I realized that my father was as much a victim of the family dysfunction as I was, albeit in a different way. His weakness was disappointing, but his predicament was genuinely painful to witness. Walking back to my car, I felt a new clarity. This wasn't just about my apartment or Jessica's debt. It was about a family system that had been broken for a long time, with roles and patterns that were hurting all of us in different ways. And I was the only one currently in a position to see it clearly and potentially break the cycle. After 2 weeks of research reflection and sleepless nights, I experienced a moment of profound clarity while sitting on my balcony one evening. The spring air was warm and the neighborhood sounds washed over me as I faced a difficult truth. This pattern would continue indefinitely unless someone broke the cycle. I had spent hours researching gambling addiction, reading testimonials from recovered addicts and advice from experts. One consistent theme emerged: enabling an addict by repeatedly solving their financial problems often prolonged the addiction by removing the natural consequences that might otherwise motivate change. I had also been learning about family systems and codependency, recognizing the roles we had all been playing for years. Jessica was the identified problem always in crisis. My mother was the enabler swooping in to rescue Jessica from consequences. My father was the passive bystander going along to keep peace. And I had been the responsible one, the family success story whose achievements were simultaneously praised and taken for granted. With the help of a therapist specializing in family systems, whom I had started seeing shortly after the confrontation, I began to see how these roles reinforced each other. My responsibility made it easier for Jessica to be irresponsible. My mother's enabling of Jessica made it easier for my father to remain passive. And all of it created a dynamic that was ultimately destructive for everyone involved. The hardest part of changing a family system, my therapist explained during our third session, is that when you change your role, everyone else will initially resist. They'll push you to go back to the familiar pattern, even if that pattern is hurting them too. With this new understanding, I crafted a response plan. First, I would set firm boundaries around what I was and wasn't willing to do. Second, I would offer appropriate help that addressed the real problem rather than just its symptoms. And third, I would communicate these boundaries and offers clearly without apology or excessive justification. I began by writing a comprehensive email to my entire family, including my parents Jessica and the extended family members who had been enlisted in the pressure campaign. I spent days drafting and revising it, ensuring my tone was compassionate but firm. The email explained that I would not be selling my apartment, but outlined what I was willing to do: help Jessica find addiction counseling resources, work with her on a realistic debt management plan, and provide emotional support through her recovery process. I clarified that my decision came from a place of love and long-term thinking, not selfishness or lack of family loyalty. I closed the email with a clear statement: I love our family deeply, and because of that love, I cannot participate in patterns that ultimately hurt us all. Jessica deserves the dignity of facing and overcoming her own challenges with appropriate support that doesn't create dependency. I'm committed to being part of a healthier family system where we all grow stronger together. The responses varied wildly. Jessica didn't reply at all. My mother sent a scathing response accusing me of playing therapist and abandoning the family when we need you most. And several extended family members sent surprisingly supportive messages saying they hadn't realized the full situation and understood my position better now. My father's response was brief but significant. I hear what you're saying, Sadie. I need time to think about all this. The next step was more direct action. I researched and organized an intervention-style family meeting with an addiction counselor who specialized in gambling disorders. I reserved a private room at a community center neutral territory for all of us and sent formal invitations explaining the purpose to address Jessica's gambling addiction with professional guidance and create a united family approach to supporting her recovery. Jessica refused to attend, which the counselor told me was not unusual for initial interventions. My parents, after much persuasion, agreed to come, though my mother made it clear she was doing so under protest. The meeting was even more difficult than I had anticipated. The counselor, a compassionate but direct woman named Diane, began by educating us about gambling addiction, its progression and effective treatment approaches. She then guided us through a discussion of how the family had been responding to Jessica's behavior and the concept of enabling versus genuine support. Enabling occurs when we shield someone from the natural consequences of their actions, Diane explained. While it comes from a place of love, it actually interferes with the addict's motivation to change and can prolong the addiction. My mother bristled visibly. Are you suggesting we should just abandon our daughter when she's in trouble? That doesn't sound like love to me. Not at all, Diane replied calmly. I'm suggesting that true support means helping Jessica access appropriate treatment while allowing her to take responsibility for her actions and their consequences. As the conversation continued, tensions rose. My mother defended her approach to helping Jessica, insisting that family loyalty meant doing whatever was necessary to solve the immediate crisis. Jessica needs us to rescue her right now, she argued. There will be time for therapy and all that later once the debt crisis is resolved. Actually, Diane countered, addressing the addiction must come first. Otherwise, the cycle will simply repeat, possibly with even larger debts next time. I had been mostly listening, letting the professional lead the discussion, but now I spoke up. Mom, we've been here before. Remember the credit card debt last year? And the car loan before that? Each time the financial help was supposed to be the last time, but without addressing the underlying problem, it just keeps happening. So this is all my fault now? My mother's voice rose. I'm a bad mother because I want to help my child. No one is saying that. I began, but my father surprised us all by interrupting. Diana, please listen. He said, his voice quiet but steady. I think Sadie and this counselor might have a point. We've been throwing money at Jessica's problems for years, and things just keep getting worse. My mother turned to him shocked. Robert, how can you say that? We're talking about our daughter's future here? Both of our daughter's futures, he corrected gently, and our own. We've already used a significant portion of our retirement savings. We can't keep doing this, Diana. It's not sustainable. It was the first time I could remember my father directly challenging my mother's approach to family problems. The room fell silent as we all processed this shift. The remainder of the meeting focused on practical next steps, finding a gambling addiction treatment program for Jessica, approaching her with unified support for treatment rather than financial bailout, and setting appropriate boundaries around money. In the days that followed, the family tensions escalated further. Jessica, upon hearing about the intervention meeting, became increasingly desperate. She sent me a late-night text that sent chills down my spine. If I can't pay these people what I owe, I don't know if I can go on living. I guess that won't be your problem, though. This implied threat of self-harm was a new and frightening escalation. I immediately called a mental health crisis line for advice, then contacted my parents to alert them to Jessica's message. I also replied to Jessica directly expressing concern for her safety while maintaining my boundary around financial help. I offered to go with her to an emergency mental health evaluation if she was feeling suicidal. When Jessica realized that her threat had resulted in a mental health response rather than financial capitulation, she quickly backtracked, insisting she hadn't meant it literally. But the incident made it even clearer that professional help was urgently needed. Through all of this turmoil, I found myself withdrawing from my family to protect my own mental health. I declined the invitation to the upcoming family dinner, breaking our monthly tradition for the first time since I had suggested it. Instead, I began consciously building a stronger support system outside my biological family. Madison and a few other close friends became my chosen family during this difficult time, providing the emotional support and validation I needed as I navigated the painful process of changing long-standing family patterns. I also found an unexpected ally in my Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who reached out after receiving my email. In a long phone conversation, she revealed that she had experienced something similar with her own brother years ago, including family pressure to provide financial bailouts for his business failures. It took me years to learn that saying no didn't mean I didn't love him, Aunt Patricia told me. It actually meant I loved him enough to not participate in patterns that kept him stuck. Her understanding and support gave me strength to continue holding my boundaries, even as the family pressure continued. And through her, I began correcting the narrative that had spread through the extended family, ensuring they understood the full context of my decision, rather than just my mother's version of events. By the end of the month, I had established a new normal. I maintained limited, carefully boundaried contact with my parents. I made it clear to Jessica that my support was available for recovery efforts, but not for financial bailouts. And I continued building my knowledge about addiction codependency and healthy family relationships. Most importantly, I crafted a formal proposal for Jessica. I was willing to help her with financial planning, job connections, and emotional support, but I would not provide money unless and until she committed to a treatment program for her gambling addiction and demonstrated consistent progress. It was a difficult line to hold, especially when Jessica would call crying, or my mother would leave voicemails questioning my love for the family. But each time I wavered, I reminded myself of what the addiction counselor had said. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone's self-destruction. 3 months after the disastrous family dinner that changed everything, my family found ourselves in very different places, both emotionally and relationally. The journey had been painful, filled with difficult conversations, tearful nights, and moments of doubt, but also with surprising growth and unexpected clarity. Jessica had continued to resist professional help, initially attempting instead to find other sources of money to address her debt crisis. She approached friends considered predatory payday loans and even interviewed for a second job, all while avoiding the core issue of her gambling addiction. It was only when one of her most aggressive creditors began legal proceedings that reality finally broke through her denial. 6 weeks after our family confrontation, Jessica hit what addiction specialists call rock bottom. She called me at 2 in the morning, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "I can't do this anymore, Sadie," she managed between sobs. "I'm so scared. I need help." The next day, I went with her to assess treatment options. We found a gambling addiction recovery program with both inpatient and outpatient components. Jessica initially balked at the idea of inpatient treatment, but after an evaluation with a counselor who gently but firmly outlined the severity of her addiction, she agreed to a 30-day residential program. My parents' reactions to Jessica's decision split along predictable lines. My mother initially responded with increased hostility toward me, convinced that I had somehow forced Jessica into treatment, instead of really helping with her debt. She called the treatment center unnecessary and suggested it was just a way for me to avoid financial responsibility. "If you had just sold the apartment," she said during one particularly difficult phone call, "Jessica wouldn't have had to go through all this trauma and public embarrassment." My father, however, surprised me with his support. "The treatment center is the right choice," he told me privately. "Your mother will come around eventually. She just needs time to adjust to all these changes." He revealed that he had started seeing a therapist himself, trying to understand his role in our family dynamics and find the courage to set his own boundaries after decades of passivity. This was perhaps the most unexpected and positive development of the entire ordeal. The extended family conflict also began to subside as Jessica entered treatment. It became harder for my mother to maintain the narrative that I was simply abandoning my sister, when the reality was that Jessica was finally getting the professional help she needed. As the dust settled, I made a difficult but necessary decision about the approaching Thanksgiving holiday. For the first time in my adult life, I declined the invitation to my parents' home, choosing instead to host a small gathering with Madison and other friends who had supported me through this challenging time. Friendsgiving became a new tradition, a celebration of the chosen family I had built outside of the complicated dynamics of my biological one. We cooked together, shared stories, and expressed genuine gratitude for each other's presence in our lives. The contrast between this warm, supportive environment and the tension of family holidays past was both stark and healing. During this period, I also focused on creating stronger personal boundaries and support systems. I joined a support group for families of addicts where I met others navigating similar challenges. Their stories helped me see that while my situation felt uniquely painful, the patterns of addiction and family enabling were unfortunately common. The group also helped me process the guilt that still occasionally surfaced, especially when my mother would make comments like, "If you really loved your sister, you'd have helped her when she needed it most." Then the other group members understood this manipulation tactic and helped me recognize it for what it was. 6 months after the confrontation, we reached a significant milestone. Jessica completed her residential treatment program and transitioned to outpatient therapy, including regular Gamblers Anonymous meetings. She had moved into a modest shared apartment with another woman from her recovery program and found a job as an administrative assistant at a local nonprofit, earning less than her credit union position, but with a more supportive environment for her recovery. Most significantly, she had developed her own debt repayment plan, with the help of a financial counselor provided by her treatment program. The plan was realistic, acknowledging that full repayment would take years, but it was entirely her own. She had negotiated with creditors, prioritized debts, and committed to a strict budget that allowed small but consistent payments. Our relationship was tentatively rebuilding, meeting occasionally for coffee in neutral locations. During one such meeting, Jessica said something that marked a true turning point. "I need to apologize to you, Sadie," she said, her eyes meeting mine directly. "Not just for asking you to sell your apartment, but for years of expecting you to fix my problems. I'm working on step 9 in GA, making amends, and I want you to know I understand now how unfair that was." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Jess. That means a lot to me." The counselors helped me see that what I was really asking wasn't for you to help me, but to suffer the consequences of my actions instead of me, she continued. And that wasn't fair or healthy for either of us. My relationship with my mother evolved more slowly and painfully. Her journey toward understanding her role in enabling Jessica's addiction had more setbacks and resistance. There were still difficult conversations and periods of limited contact when her behavior became too toxic. But even she began to show small signs of growth. During a cautious phone conversation about 9 months after the confrontation, she made a comment that suggested a crack in her previous certainty. "The family therapist at Jessica's program said something that's been bothering me," she admitted. "She said that sometimes when we think we're helping, we're actually making it harder for our loved ones to grow. I'm not saying she's right about everything, but it's made me think." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of her enabling behavior or an apology for the pressure she had put on me, but it was a start, a small opening toward potential change. By the 1-year anniversary of that fateful dinner, our family landscape had transformed dramatically. Jessica was maintaining her sobriety from gambling, working her program one day at a time. She had experienced some slips, but had used the tools from treatment to get back on track quickly. She was employed and following her debt repayment plan faithfully. It would take years to resolve the financial damage, but she was facing it with a maturity I had never seen in her before. My father had found his voice in family discussions, no longer simply deferring to my mother to keep the peace. His therapy had helped him understand how his passivity had contributed to the family dysfunction, and he was working to change patterns established over decades of marriage. My mother's journey was the most complex. She still struggled to fully accept her role in enabling Jessica's addiction, and occasionally slipped into old patterns of emotional manipulation. But she was attending a family support group at Jessica's recommendation, and slowly, incrementally beginning to understand the difference between helping and enabling. As for me, I remained in my apartment, the home I had worked so hard to create for myself. Its value had only grown both financially and emotionally. It now represented not just my financial discipline and independence, but also my capacity to hold boundaries, even when doing so was painful and difficult. The experience had taught me lessons I never expected to learn from a family crisis. Family love should never require self-destruction. True love means wanting health and growth for everyone involved, not sacrifice from one person to enable another's dysfunction. Enabling is not helping. It feels like help in the moment, but causes deeper harm in the long run by preventing necessary growth and change. Boundaries are not selfish. They're necessary for healthy relationships. They define where one person ends and another begins, allowing genuine connection, rather than unhealthy enmeshment. Financial independence is particularly crucial for women creating options and security that allow us to make choices based on what's truly best rather than dependency. Breaking unhealthy patterns takes tremendous courage, but brings a freedom nothing else can provide. The temporary pain of disrupting familiar dynamics is worth the lasting health that can follow. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone we care about is refuse to participate in their self-destruction, even when they and others call us selfish for doing so. I still have my apartment, and Jessica is rebuilding her life on a healthier foundation. Our family relationships have been forever altered, but in ways that ultimately offer hope for more genuine connection, based on mutual respect rather than dysfunctional roles and expectations. It's not a perfect happily ever after, but rather an ongoing journey of healing while maintaining the healthy boundaries that make that healing possible. Have you ever had to stand your ground against family pressure to protect your own well-being? The hardest boundaries to set are often with the people we love most. Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic stories about navigating complex family dynamics. And remember, sometimes the most courageous act of love is saying no when saying yes would cause harm. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength in your own.